The Bible says God is love. The Bible never says God is wrath. He's capable of wrath. But we have to provoke him to it. We do not have to provoke God to love us. Love flows from his spontaneous heart. And the love of God is morally serious love. His smile is not an all-approving grin. His love was displayed at the cross, where he paid for the crimes of his enemies. Now, here's an amazing truth. We have parachuted into a universe where ultimate reality is the love of God for his enemies. You have to be a Christian to be crazy enough to believe that. And it's true. That's who God is. The book of Jonah is about who God is. This is the love God invites us to accept from him. And this is the love God calls us to show to our enemies. We all have enemies, people we resent for bad things they've done. So we don't want it that way. We don't like that. We're embarrassed by it. Let's admit it. And following Christ includes both receiving his love for us and learning to show love to others, including people we don't like. And as we stumble our way there, God himself is lifting us up into a deeper place in his own heart, where we experience the depths of his love for us. That's what the book of Jonah is about, the love of God. The prophet Jonah is not the hero in this book. The hero is God, and Jonah, I can't prove this, but I think Jonah himself wrote this book as an act of repentance. I'm guessing in his later years, the longer we live, the more regrets we have, right? He wrote this book as an act of repentance. He wrote it to invite all of us to join him in marveling at the love of God. So let's think it through, and I want to offer one insight from each of the 4 chapters of the book of Jonah. In my Bible, it's just 2 pages, short book. Here's chapter 1. God is pursuing both our mission field and us missionaries. God is pursuing both our mission field and us missionaries. Chapter 1, verse 3. But Jonah rose to flee from the presence of the Lord. Now you know the story. God told Jonah to go take the gospel to the city of Nineveh. And Jonah hightailed it in the opposite direction. Good luck with that, Jonah. And as the story unfolds, we see how God has more ways of pursuing Jonah than Jonah has ways of escaping God. In verse 2, God says to Jonah, "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me." God uses this strong word, evil, to describe the Assyrian city, Nineveh. One scholar I read called the Assyrians, quote, the Nazis of the ancient Near East. So, who can blame Jonah for running? But sooner or later, God calls every one of us to go show his love to someone we would rather avoid. And when God does that, he's planting the flag of his kingdom of grace more deeply within us, as well as reaching out to someone else. So the tension in this book of Jonah, and it's filled with irony, the book, the tension in this book is the contrast between the two main characters in the drama, Jonah and God. They are always, if the book of Jonah were a play, God and Jonah are always on stage. The other actors in the drama, the sailors on the ship in chapter 1, the people of Nineveh in chapter 3, they come on the stage, they go off the stage, but Jonah and God are there face to face the entire time. They're the lead characters in the drama. Chapter 4 will affirm that God is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, and relenting from disaster. But Jonah is kind of like the disciples in Luke chapter 9 who wanted to call down fire from heaven on the Samaritan village, and Jesus rebuked them. The Lord relents from disaster. Jonah relishes disaster for Nineveh. So the love of God is pursuing Jonah as much as he's pursuing Nineveh. That's what the book of Jonah is about. God saving the mission field and the missionary. It's what I need. More than sometimes I even realize. So when the storm here in chapter 1 gets rough, the crew on the ship question Jonah. What does Jonah say? In chapter 1, the key word is fear. Jonah, when he identifies himself, he says, I am a Hebrew and I fear the Lord. Really? Jonah, if you really feared the Lord, you wouldn't be on that ship. Excuse me. Does anybody else in the scene demonstrate an appropriate fear? Verse 5, then the mariners were afraid. Verse 10, then the men were exceedingly afraid. Verse 16, then the men feared the Lord exceedingly. They're trending well. Those sailors, they don't know a whole lot of theology, but their hearts are responsive with what they're seeing. They move from cold fear of the elements all the way to a real fear of the Lord. And Jonah? Not so much. But God is pursuing him. God loves him. Okay, that's chapter 1. Chapter 2, here's the insight. God knows our hearts better than we do. God knows our hearts better than we do. Verses 8 and 9, chapter 2. Those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love, but I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. Now, this is a little bit crazy. Jonah is deep down in the ocean, inside this big fish, praying. He's praising God for his narrow escape. He thought he was drowning. His life passed before his eyes. He said, this is it. But God rescued him down in the depths of the sea. Now, some interpreters read Jonah's prayer in chapter 2 as a godly prayer. I have my reservations about this because this prayer is a masterpiece of biblical eloquence. Jonah is picking out of the Psalms phrases, verses, and from his memory, he really knows the Bible. He's putting together this magnificent prayer to God. But here's the problem. Nowhere in this prayer does Jonah say, I've been wrong. Nowhere does he say, I'm sorry, Lord, I should have followed you. He does say, in verse 9, salvation belongs to the Lord. But if salvation belongs to the Lord and it's his to give away, doesn't the Lord have the right to give it to the people of Nineveh too? Now, Jonah obviously delights in God's grace and mercy toward him, but the problem is he feels no urgency that anyone else should receive the same grace and mercy. I mean, I wish Jonah would say, Lord, I'm an idiot. What am I doing here? I mean, you just rescued my sorry self by sending this whale. Thank you. But don't just save me. I mean, those nice sailors up there who treated me well up at the surface, Jonah doesn't know the storm has calmed down. They're being, Lord, buffeted by that terrible storm. Save them too. But all Jonah can think is, well, the Lord rescued me. Isn't everything wonderful? Verse 10. We know what the Lord thought of Jonah's prayer. Verse 10. And the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto the dry land. Vomit is a strong English word. It's an icky word, and it's a good translation of the original text. That's what it says. And I think I understand Jonah. I can be incredibly oblivious. Just ask my wife. God's heart is sensitive. And God's heart is pursuing Jonah's heart. And my heart. And your heart. Chapter 3. Here's the insight. God can get through to anyone, anywhere. God can get through to anyone, anywhere. Chapter 3, verse 5. And the people of Nineveh believed God. They called for a fast and put on sackcloth, from the greatest of them to the least. So I love the way chapter 3 begins. The word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. God is so patient and kind. He gives Jonah another chance. And this time, Jonah does go to Nineveh. His heart isn't in it, but wow, the hearts of the Ninevites, they're all in. They're like the sailors on that ship in chapter 1. They're responsive to God. And God doesn't even offer them a positive incentive. The only message is, verse 4, yet 40 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown. Y'all are going down. But what do? They fast, they pray, they confess their sins. So God, in mercy and grace, relents from disaster. He rewrites their future as a new era of mercy. It's beautiful. And it makes me wonder, what are the yearnings, the unspoken, undiscerned yearnings in people's hearts throughout the whole Nashville area right now that only God can see? Jesus said the fields are white for harvest. Bad sinners make great repenters by God's grace. We just sang about it. So there's hope for every one of us in the grace and mercy of God. Chapter 4, final insight. God's gracious heart calms our angry hearts. God's gracious heart calms our angry hearts. Verse 11. And should I not pity Nineveh, that great city? Jonah chapter 4, there's humor in the Bible. Jonah chapter 4 is hilariously ironic and touchingly poignant. The sunshine of God's grace and mercy and kindness is beaming down on this tragic Assyrian city. And what is Jonah thinking? He's complaining to God. Here's my paraphrase of verses 2 through 4. Here's how I would restate it. Jonah says, "This is why I ran away in the first place. I knew you'd be merciful. I saw it coming. You're always like this. It's what you said to Moses back in Exodus 34. I memorized it in my catechism as a boy. Question: what is the glory of God? Answer: the glory of God is the Lord, gracious and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love." What? Merciful to them? I can't live in a universe like this. Let me die. And we all sense how crazy this is, right? Check this out. In verse 3, Jonah quotes the Bible to God. he quotes Exodus 34, the display of God's glory, one of the major passages in the Bible. He quotes Exodus 34 about the glory of God's grace, and he throws the grace of God back into God's teeth as an accusation. And God doesn't nuke this little twerp. Why? God really is gracious. God is as merciful